proprio, est-ce que t'es tanné de ton logement qui te coûte une fortune? Viens nous rejoindre à 11h au métro de l'Assomption. On lutte contre les logements trop chers. On lutte contre la gentrification. Fuck les condos. Fuck les proprios. Viens nous rejoindre à 11h au métro de l'Assomption.
It is July 1st, and in the rest of the country, that means Canada Day in Quebec, where a vast majority of leases expire. Today's moving day. Ordinarily, you know, that's chaotic and almost fun and almost amusing. But over the last 10 years, the median price of rent in Montreal has more than doubled. In a practical sense, that means that there are 2,000 households across Quebec still looking for a place to stay. We're told that the solution to this crisis is abundance, but a recent report by Radio-Canada found that there are 100,000 vacant apartments across the province. Why is there a housing crisis? Because those apartments are too expensive for most people to afford. In some towns like Victoriaville, the vacancy rate is 0%. And in towns like Montreal, in cities like Montreal, if you don't have a lot of money, the vacancy rate is less than 1%. These people that we're riding with here at POPIR, well, they want to make sure that people don't end up on the streets. They want to make sure that people are connected to resources that they might need. Sometimes that might mean an overnight stay at a motel until you can find something more permanent. The people at POPIR right here were ready for people to even stay in their offices if need be. This is really a rush against time, and on a day as hot as today, I mean, it just feels even more dangerous than usual.
En ce moment, on fait la tournée des quartiers Villemort, Côte-Saint-Paul, Saint-Henri et Petite-Bourgogne pour voir s'il n'y a pas des gens qui ont été mis à la rue ce matin puis qui ne sauraient pas c'est quoi leurs droits, c'est quoi leurs ressources. Fait qu'on fait une petite tournée de quartier avant d'aller à la manif. Si on trouve des gens, on va leur donner des ressources. Puis en même temps, on en profite pour inviter les gens à venir à la manif qui est à 11h. Depuis à peu près 2 mois, on a beaucoup affiché dans le quartier puis sur les réseaux sociaux pour dire aux gens que s'ils n'ont pas de logement au 1er juillet, ils peuvent nous contacter pour qu'on les aide. Mais là, on fait le tour du quartier parce qu'on sait qu'on n'arrive pas à rejoindre tout le monde. Fait que même les statistiques qu'on a sur les personnes qui sont sans logis au 1er juillet, c'est incomplet parce qu'il y a des gens qui n'ont pas réussi à rejoindre les ressources, les comités logement, le FRAPRU ou la ville. Fait que c'est quand même une sous-estimation, là, les 2000 quelques personnes là, ce matin qui sont encore sans logement. Fait qu'on se dit que si on peut rattraper même juste une personne ce matin, on va espérer de pouvoir l'aider.
Êtes-vous tanné de payer votre logement fucking trop cher? Vous voulez plus de logements sociaux, un meilleur contrôle des loyers? Vous êtes tanné de la gentrification? On se rejoint à 11h au métro de l'Assomption. Yes!
Je pense qu'on a convaincu eux.
Ouais, hein?
Ils vont être là.
J'ai vu leur face, c'est comme eux, ils vont venir à manif.
Ouais. Quelque chose qui nous indiquerait que des gens se retrouvent à la rue, ça pourrait être par exemple beaucoup de meubles qui sont laissés sur le bord du chemin avec des effets personnels, des sacs de vêtements, des livres, sa télé, etc. Fait que pas juste 1 ou 2 meubles laissés à la rue. Ça pourrait être des gens qui ont l'air désemparés, peut-être en panique, qui ne savent pas exactement où aller. Les autres années, le comité logement n'avait pas fait de tournée de quartier le 1er juillet. C'est juste que là, au moment où on est, la crise est vraiment pire qu'elle l'était l'an passé, puis qu'elle l'était il y a 5 ans, puis qu'elle l'était il y a 10 ans. C'est quand même sans précédent.
Et cette année, as-tu remarqué qu'il y a beaucoup plus d'évictions?
Il y a moins d'évictions qu'il y a déjà eu, parce qu'en ce moment, il y a un moratoire sur les évictions. Le problème, c'est que les propriétaires, à place d'évincer via ce qui est légal en temps normal, en dehors du moratoire, par exemple pour des travaux majeurs et tout, les propriétaires, ce qu'on voit qu'ils font, c'est qu'ils font du harcèlement jusqu'à ce que les locataires s'en aillent, en fait. Ils rendent la vie tellement insupportable dans le logement que les locataires finissent par être évincés de force parce qu'ils ont peur de vivre dans leur logement. Une autre chose que les propriétaires vont faire, c'est de refuser les chèques de loyer. Puis d'ailleurs, ça devrait des dossiers au talent non-paiement alors que c'est eux qui ont refusé. Est-ce que le problème d'eau est réparé?
Je checkais breathing in mode. Ça, les 6 affaires qu'il dit, je les ai toutes.
Ah ouais, ok.
Puis ça fait juste, on est l'été là. J'ai pas une grippe ici. J'ai mal à la gorge. T'as-tu ma voix comment elle a changé?
Ouais.
Et voilà, c'est tout en train d'endurer ça.
Tu veux-tu qu'on la fasse, la démarche, pour l'obliger à faire les réparations?
Oui,
Oui?
oui, s'il vous plaît.
La semaine passée, ça te tentait pas vraiment?
Qui a, tu sais quoi, il se colle de moi, lui.
OK. On va aller faire les démarches. Ouais.
OK. Hey,
Ça marche?
oui.
OK.
Mon nom, c'est William James Donny.
Alright. On se passe cette semaine. Bye, Jim.
Bonne chance, Jim.
À plus tard.
Last word, Nick, I'm sorry, but I can't live like this. Anna, sorry. Ça, c'est mon propriétaire, Anna puis Nick. Ouais.
Tu viens-tu nous rejoindre à manif à 11h?
Pardon?
On manifeste à 11h. Au métro de l'Assomption.
J'ai
si tu
pas
veux.
dormi encore, moi, je dors même plus.
Je te le laisse quand même.
Je dors plus. Hey, j'ai pas mangé depuis. Je sais pas quand.
Il va y avoir des hot dogs sur place si tu veux manger.
Bon, tu vas manger, j'ai encore la senteur dans le nez. Oh, c'est fou, là. J'ai encore la senteur de ça dans le nez. Regarde les termites. Dans ma fenêtre, là, c'est gros même. 2 shots. Hey! Take care, guys. See
Take
you
care,
on
brother.
time. On va checker ça.
Parfait.
On se voit demain au plus tard. Jim, ça fait 1 mois qu'il y a une énorme inondation dans son appart. Puis il arrive la même chose qu'avec plein de locataires. Il voulait pas qu'on fasse de démarche parce qu'il veut pas déranger son propriétaire. En fait, il a dit au propriétaire qu'il y avait une inondation et tout, mais il voulait pas pousser pour pas le déranger. Puis là, il est comme, ah, ben, tu sais, il y a des enfants, ça doit lui coûter cher. Puis là, je lui expliquais que c'est les assurances qui m'ont payé, qu'il met pas son propriétaire dans le trouble, mais il voulait vraiment pas le déranger puis pas le mettre dans le trouble. Ça arrive vraiment souvent que les locataires nous disent qu'ils veulent pas faire les démarches légales pour pas déranger le propriétaire, pour pas être dans une mauvaise relation, par empathie pour leur situation à eux en tant que propriétaire, en tant que personne. Puis de l'autre côté, on voit pas ça de la part des propriétaires envers les locataires que nous on rencontre. Évidemment, nous on rencontre les locataires qui sont dans des situations problématiques. Fait que c'est sûr que c'est pas là qu'on rencontre les propriétaires qui ont le plus d'empathie, mais c'est vraiment... ça nous limite vraiment de devoir passer par le système légal et tout pour régler les enjeux parce qu'il y a des gens qui veulent pas utiliser ce système-là. Genre, Jim, ça fait 35 ans qu'il vit là, je pense. En tout cas, sur le coin de rue, ça fait au moins 30 ans. Puis... c'est dur de parler puis conduire. Et surveiller qu'il n'y a pas du monde dans la rue. Ouais, lui, ça fait vraiment longtemps qu'il vit là. Puis s'il ouvre un dossier au TAL pour se défendre, pour exiger que des travaux soient faits pour les inondations dans son logement, pour la moisissure et tout, ben tous les propriétaires dans le futur vont savoir qu'il y a eu recours au tribunal. Puis techniquement, ils n'ont pas le droit de discriminer parce que le locataire a eu recours au tribunal pour défendre ses droits. Mais comment est-ce qu'on le prouve que c'est ça qui est arrivé? Que c'est comme ça que la personne a été blacklistée? C'est vraiment terrible. Ça serait la moindre des choses que les recours au TAL soient anonymes pour tous les cas de gens qui font juste défendre leurs droits, tu sais.
On lutte contre la gentrification
et la
à
reconnaissance.
11h au métro de l'Assomption. Fuck les proprios. Fuck les loyers trop chers. Pompiers contre la gentrification.
Vous connaissez la melting?
Oui.
C'est quoi ça?
C'est un gros bâtiment industriel qui était une malterie, là, une melting, qui faisait de la bière. Puis ça fait des années que c'est abandonné, puis que le quartier revendique un espace 100% communautaire, avec du logement social. Il y a vraiment, ça fait 10 ans qu'il y a des super beaux plans pour ce terrain-là, sauf que ça appartient à Renwick puis à Luc Poirier. Vous voyez c'est qui Luc Poirier?
Oh, yeah.
Ouais. Yeah. C'est lui un des 2 propriétaires du terrain. Puis dans un reportage, il a dit que, entre autres, ce qui l'empêchait de développer pour l'instant, c'était les maudits militants communautaires qui luttent contre ces projets privés. Puis eux, ce qu'ils proposent pour l'instant, c'est genre à peu près 17% de logements sociaux sur le site, là, c'est même pas 20. Nous, ce qu'on demande, c'est que la ville se réserve le terrain, même mettre le terrain en réserve. Et en fasse vraiment un projet communautaire qui donne les permis seulement pour du développement communautaire, du logement social, puis que ce soit pas du privé qui puisse être là. C'est le dernier gros terrain aux abords du canal de la Chine. tout le canal de la Chine pratiquement a été développé en condos. On a perdu 10% de logements sociaux dans Saint-Henri dans les 4 dernières années. Quelque chose comme ça. En proportion, on n'a pas perdu des unités de logement, mais il y a tellement eu de condos qui ont été construits qu'on est passé de quelque chose comme 26% de logements sociaux dans le quartier à genre moins de 18%.
Just think skinny thoughts.
C'est correct, là.
Ouais,
Ah, ici, c'est chill.
ça passe, ça passe.
You're good.
Petit char. Yeah. La moyenne des augmentations des gens qui n'ont pas déménagé, ça va être à peu près 8% d'augmentation, alors que les gens qui ont déménagé, l'augmentation monte à environ 40%, parce que les gens vont pas avoir vérifié la clause G, le prix du bail d'avant, ou les propriétaires l'ont pas inscrit ou ont inscrit une fausse information, qui augmente vraiment beaucoup les loyers. Donc là, ce qu'on voit, c'est qu'avec une grosse augmentation des prix des loyers, ben, les gens essaient de ne pas déménager. Ce qu'on voit, c'est qu'il y a des gens qui voudraient vraiment déménager, par exemple des couples qui se séparent et qui voudraient vivre séparément, puis qui restent ensemble pendant des années, le temps de se trouver des logements qui sont adéquats. Là.
Dans une relation abusive, admettons, souvent la crise du logement va venir empirer les choses.
Nos proprios de marde, viens nous rejoindre à 11h au métro de l'Assomption. On lutte contre la gentrification, on lutte contre les logements trop chers, on lutte pour plus de logements sociaux. Fuck les proprios, fuck les condos.
The crew takes the cash and the people with the money. Yeah, every game's funny when your nose is getting money and the people start to laugh, but ain't a damn thing funny.
Non, c'est ça n'a même pas rapport avec le film.
Non?
On manifeste à 11h au métro de l'Assomption contre la crise du logement, contre le logement trop cher. Viens nous rejoindre, 11h au métro de l'Assomption. Il va aussi avoir des hot dogs.
Imagine, il n'y a pas de hot dog.
Mais moi, je serais quand même dévastée, là. Alice est contre le logement cher. Elle est contre les proprios.
Tu as quelque chose à dire?
Fuck les proprios.
Deborah, why are you here today?
There's so many people who are going to be, they are homeless as of today because the rents have just gone out of control. If you're making minimum wage, even 40 hours a week, and the rent is like $1,500 for a studio apartment, you can't afford it.
It's become the new normal that like on July 1st, there's going to be tons of people on the streets.
Yeah,
Is that something you know personally?
Oh,
You've
yeah.
seen personally?
This is the first year that I actually know somebody. She was going to lose her apartment. She had no idea. She had no money because the person she was living with had died. So she couldn't afford the rent anymore where she was. But she couldn't find anything she could afford because by now, all the bachelors and, like I said, they're $1,500. If you're on welfare, forget it. She applied for welfare. It's $800 a month. She can't get anything. She's 64 years old. Right now, she's living in a student dorm, but if she can't find anything in 2 months, she's, it's like her cousin's couch or my couch or the street. Everybody knows someone. So,
What's the meaning of the
the keys.
hearings?
And the keys are because people can't have keys because they can't afford an apartment.
Pouvoir payer le loyer ou les repas.
Ça prend des logements sociaux pour se loger comme il faut. Il est mal logé.
Comme vous voulez.
Mais il faut autre chose que du privé.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
C'est la guerre.
We're outside the TAL, the Tribunal Administratif du Logement. That's Quebec's rental board. The people here, there's over 120 community groups represented. They just made a big old mess outside, I guess, to show how ineffective this organization is. The median price of an apartment has more than doubled in Montreal over the last 10 years. Same across Quebec. These groups aren't just from the city, they're from all over, because this has become universally a problem across Quebec. I keep hearing squat the TAL. This is like the renters tribunal. This is where all the big decisions get made on affordability and rent transfers and all that stuff. Is it that the TAL isn't doing its job, or is it that the rules don't work? Like what's going on?
Well, the TAL is an instrument of the state, right? And the state at this point supports speculators. The state is run by speculators, doesn't protect tenants. I'm here almost every week accompanying tenants to the housing tribunal. It's underfunded, the waiting lists are super long, but even at the end of the day, if you do that, if you get a court hearing, you're like, set up for failure regardless. So it's like, do we want the eviction machine to run faster? I don't know.
There was this perception for a very long time that Quebec has the best rent control in North America. The last 10 years, rents have doubled. Why?
Well, Quebec does have better rent control than other places in Canada, and it's because housing activists fought for that, since way back, since like the 70s. There's a reason why we have like a cloger. There's a reason why we have HLMs where it's 25% of your revenue. These things were like really fought for. We see, with like ongoing capitalism and the stage of capitalism that we're reaching, very clearly it just goes, their lust and their ability to extract profit from us is growing because they're allowed to. Because it's a state made for speculators by speculators. We gotta take it back.
So for the people who you accompany to the TAL and for the people that you work with through your job, how desperate is it getting right now?
It's really desperate. And I work for a nonprofit. We do what we can to help tenants through the court proceedings and all of that. But honestly, what's more effective is organizing grassroots, because nothing that will actually make systemic change is going to be government funded. So I work with other groups, I work with Offensive Populaire, for example, which is really based on neighborhood organizing, and it's for the people, by the people. We don't rely on government funds to do what we do, and I think unfortunately that's really important, because we certainly can't rely on the state of speculators to give us money to fight them. You know what I'm saying?
This direct action to get results. How does that look like, you think, in the next couple of years?
I don't know. I think, it's not just tenants that have to come to the TAL and do demonstrations. It's going to require working class people all coming together as a united front. And this is no easy feat, but they're setting the grounds for this, right? We're all at our wits' end. People who have worked their whole lives all of a sudden can't pay rent. So the game's changing a bit. And I try to be optimistic because I don't know, we got to win.
And there have been suicides because people are losing their apartment.
Yeah.
When people can't move out of a bad domestic situation, you see a relationship between the housing crisis and domestic violence. It goes beyond, I think, affecting just a handful of people.
Yeah.
It's a huge societal problem.
Yeah. No, for sure. It affects everyone at this point. In where I'm from, in my neighborhood, there was a elderly man who committed suicide after he received an eviction notice from a really well-known speculator who actually lives in my neighborhood. This guy's kids play with other people's kids in the alley. Meanwhile, he's evicting them from their homes. And this is not just a guy who owns a little building. We're talking, it owns many doors. He's affiliated with numbered companies. This ruins people's lives, and all kinds of people's lives, not just people who are traditionally considered poor, below the poverty line. We're talking everyday people who work full-time jobs, who went to school for their jobs, who are working public services. We're all hurting, for sure.
Moi, je suis délégué syndical dans Montréal-Nord, donc 85% de personnes qui sont issues de l'immigration, 85% environ aussi qui sont des femmes. Donc, il y a des enjeux beaucoup. On vit avec ça. On parle de personnes avec des jobs à 25$ de l'heure, 30$ de l'heure, mais il y en a aussi qui sont dans la précarité, qui vont chercher des paniers alimentaires, genre des aides quelconques aussi. Nous autres, on en a beaucoup. Il y a beaucoup de détresse là-dedans aussi. Fait que c'est important d'être là aujourd'hui, appuyer tout le monde, parce que même nous autres ici, ça coûte cher le loyer aussi, exactement.
C'est le genre d'affaire où je pense qu'il y a peut-être 10 ans ou avant ça, on n'aurait pas pensé voir autant de manifestants. Exact. Mais là, avec la situation, avec la crise du logement, ça devient comme tout le monde est affecté.
Ben, il y a des crises partout. Hein, il y a des crises. Là, moi, on était très impliqué pour le PEC, les orphelins du PEC. Moi, j'ai des collègues qui vivent ça encore aussi. On était là aussi, on était là ces lignes aussi. Le syndicat, ça représente pas juste les travailleurs, ça représente aussi la marge de la population qui est pas représentée non plus. Fait que je pense que c'est ça. Là, on voit que de plus en plus les luttes là, sont rendues des luttes. Il y a même les patrons qui se mettent aussi. Si on parle du PEC, là, c'est la société civile au complet là, qui s'est mis là-dedans aussi. Puis là, ben, au niveau des loyers, ça se fait ailleurs là, d'aller chercher des subventions, aider les gens à leur trouver, à les loger. À un moment donné, les proprios, arrêtez de penser au Airbnb tout le temps. Là, puis je veux dire, à un moment donné, il y a du monde qui sont dans la rue. Là. Chris, il y a du monde à 25$ de l'heure qui dorment dans leur voiture, qui mangent pas bien, qui voient pas leurs enfants. C'est la détresse pour vrai partout. Là, puis on parle plus juste à Montréal maintenant, là, on parle partout. Ouais. Dans les banlieues, dans les grandes villes. Fait que je pense que c'est un combat que la société québécoise se doit de mener, à mon avis. Je pense que on est là. Puis en tant que syndicat, c'est ça aussi. C'est un peu l'essence de tout ça. Le Québec a été construit avec des grosses collaborations syndicales. Puis maintenant, il faut que qu'on soit là pour ces luttes-là. Là, puis comme je dis, en tant que délégué syndical, en tant que syndicaliste, on est souvent le paravent, le bouclier pour nos membres, pour les gens qui ont de la misère. Donc, nous autres, c'est un naturel, là, c'est un no-brainer de se rendre ici puis de venir crier avec les gens. Là, ça, c'est sûr, certain.
As people across Canada struggle to find an apartment that won't drain their bank account, condos and luxury units sit empty. In Vancouver, Mark Carney and BC Premier David Eby are proposing to purchase some of these vacant units to transform them into affordable rent-to-own housing, with Pierre Poilievre calling it a bailout for condo owners. Financial details of the sale are not public yet, so it's unclear if they'd get a discounted price or pay above market rate so condo owners can recoup their investments. Meanwhile, in Montreal, affordable housing's vacancy rate sits at 1.5%, but vacancy rates for more expensive units are much higher. Mayor Soraya Martinez-Ferrada told CBC Daybreak that the city needs to increase affordable housing supply without touching the prices of the units that are already on the market.
Isn't it frustrating, though, that it feels like perhaps some landlords are not responding to the market? The market's saying that the rents should be lower, but they're holding them up, and they're not doing what the market dictates they should be doing. Is there anything you can do to kind of motivate them to perhaps put these rents lower so that people actually can get into them?
Well, unfortunately, as a mayor, I don't have the means to force the private market, right? But what I can do is making sure that we partner with the private sector and saying, how can we make sure that these apartments are lower in terms of rent and we can put them on the market?
After 2 unhoused people died within 24 hours back in March, Martinez-Ferrada said that she felt powerless facing the homelessness crisis. The city has also announced interest-free rental loans for tenants, effectively subsidizing landlords' profits as rents continue to climb. Montreal is also spending $500,000 to repair 45 supported housing units for occupancy by September to try to get people off the streets. But it's a drop in the bucket compared to the estimated 5,000 unhoused folks in the city. Experts told Montreal Gazette that the CAQ's housing law reforms during their second term benefited landlords over tenants. While all this seems disheartening for those of us who don't own our own homes, a growing majority in Montreal, some citizens are taking the housing crisis into their own hands. In Toronto, York South-Weston Tenant Union and Climate Justice TO joined to form a citywide tenant union back in April. This comes after a series of rent strikes that led to, quote, amicable settlements between landlords and tenants. Toronto tenants were withholding rent due to neglected repairs and excessive rent hikes. Here in Montreal, the Montreal Autonomous Tenants Union, or SLAM, has been holding neglectful and abusive landlords accountable. Cléo Clamen, a member of SLAM, tells me about the successes of direct action that she's witnessed. Well, thank you so much, Cleo, for being on the show. To start off, I'd love to hear about the work that SLAM does, who's a part of it, what the sort of ethos is.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So SLAM is just a union of tenants. We're all volunteers. We don't have any external funding. And our ethos is kind of working together to create better living conditions for tenants outside of the state. So that can mean direct action, that can mean organizing our buildings, showing up for each other, and kind of just recognizing that the current housing system of landlordism, of extracting money from tenants for the fundamental need of housing is not something that works, and it's not something that's acceptable, and it's not something that we believe should exist.
And how long have you been working with SLAM? Like, what prompted you to get involved?
So I've been a member of SLAM for, I think, a bit over a year. I was having my own issues with the landlord when I first moved to Montreal. And then over the past 6 months or so, I've gotten a lot more involved. Now that I've had support from other tenants with navigating my own case and getting that dealt with, I've been kind of doing the same for other people, showing up to help other people with their landlord issues, with their cases, with their buildings. And that's kind of what SLAM is all about. It almost just feels like a giant group of friends. Like, I've made so many friends and found so much community in the union because it's kind of just a bunch of neighbors in different neighborhoods, and we're all just regular people who organize together. And yeah, it's a really, really lovely group of people. It's probably like one of the most, as much as the work that we do can be very exhausting, and as much as like organizing around housing can be very draining sometimes, as much as sometimes there's very perfect stories, it can be very heartwarming to win better material conditions for each other and to help people just very much materially improve their lives by fighting back against landlords.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about some of those wins, some of those successes, what kinds of impacts you've seen from like the work that SLAM does.
You know, absolutely. So a good friend of mine is in the union last summer. Her and her partner got a 19.8% annual rent increase.
Holy shit.
Yeah. So, and the landlord had been trying to get rid of all of his tenants and turn all of the units into Airbnbs.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe in that building, her and her partner, they are the only unit that's not an Airbnb now.
Wow.
And they'd already gotten, I think, around 10%. I don't remember the exact number, but she said something. I think it was a low double-digit number, like 10% the year before. So, like, they could not afford this rent increase.
Mm-hmm.
And 19.8%, I don't think most people could afford 19.8%.
Yeah.
How most people are doing right now. But we organized around that, and her landlord's business was down the block, and we organized a picket line against her landlord's business. And people stood outside his coffee shop with banners and with flyers saying, this is who owns this business, this is what he does to his tenants. And they went back to the negotiating table, nothing much happened. So they said, okay, we're going to have a second picket. And the day before the second picket, he sits back down, he says, okay, we're going to give you a 0% rent increase, but you take on the hydro. And she was like, yeah, taking on the hydro one is, I think it's only a few percent of the rent. Like, it wasn't very much, but also it means that next year, this year, when they're doing another percentage-based increase, the hydro doesn't factor into that. So all of the subsequent rent increases are going to be smaller in terms of dollar amount. So this was a huge win. We went from 19.8% to 0%. There's another, in 2022, there was a building owned by this corporate landlord called Cogier downtown. And there were about 100 tenants in that building. And there was mold, there was all sorts of issues with disrepair. One tenant alleged to us that he had a leaking pipe explode on him because of improper heating, and then Cogier billed him for the damages.
Wow.
And yeah, so it was pretty bad. And a bunch of Cogier tenants formed kind of like a tenants council in their building, and then they reached out to some SLAM allies. And I obviously wasn't a member at the time, this was many years ago, but SLAM showed up and they went to the landlord's office and they disrupted it for 30 minutes. And the next day, Cogier reached an agreement with us and with the tenants where they agreed to complete the repairs. There was a tenant who wanted out of their lease. They got out of their lease. And they compensated all of those tenants for the repairs that had gone undone for so long. There's also things like I heard a story about a building in Mile End where the landlord tried to illegally evict the whole building. SLAM did one picket line at their office, and all of those evictions got stopped. There's all sorts of stories where evictions are delayed or ideally prevented. There's all sorts of stories where people can fight back against rent increases through direct action, and they can get, like they've gotten like sometimes even 0% the next year, or like, and like significantly reduced the year before, because oftentimes like a landlord might give a rent increase and then they'll see how organized that tenant is and they'll see their involvement in SLAM and they'll figure it's not even worth the trouble of trying to extract more money from that tenant the next year because of how much the union is able to fight back. And I think that's kind of the magic of it, is that one tenant against even just a small landlord, especially a corporate landlord, it's like, it doesn't feel like you have a lot of power. It feels very hopeless, and there's a lot of learned helplessness that tenants sometimes fall into. But if you're in a union with dozens or hundreds of other tenants, you guys are all supporting each other and fighting back, then it's like a landlord might try to evict you and 50 of your friends show up and the landlord is like, I'm not bothering with this anymore.
Yeah, it's a lot to take on. And there's the tenants union, and then also like tenants councils can form as well, like for individual buildings, or is that how it kind of works?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay,
so like one building that I was door knocking for recently in Milton Park, they're in the process of forming a tenants council because their building got sold to a corporate landlord who's like not answering emails, not answering the phones, trying to get all of the tenants to agree to like pre-authorized account withdrawals, generally being very sketchy. And this landlord, it's actually, I think, owned technically by like a shell company.
Right.
But the landlord has a history of buying up buildings, kicking everyone out, and jacking up the rents. And it's a lot of elderly residents who live there, many of whom are not fluent in English or French in that neighborhood, because it's a lot of like older immigrant communities. So it's very good that these communities are able to get organized and able to get, I guess, take that power back.
Yeah, totally. And in terms of direct action, what kinds of tactics do you see that are working really well?
I mean, I think the picket lines are really big because the thing that landlords really care about often is their reputation and their bottom line, which is very affected by their reputation. If people see a picket line with a bunch of people protesting outside of a landlord office, that gets people's attention. That immediately can make people aware of what's going on. So I think the picket lines are a really big thing. Another thing that people often do is a banner drop. They'll like hang a banner from their balcony that says like, my landlord is doing this. That tenant who had the 19.8 rent increase, that's one of the tactics that she used, is they had this banner that they dropped from their balcony. And then that building's on Saint Denis. So everyone who walked past would see, oh, wow, that landlord is doing this. So it's kind of just
traffic.
Utilizing that reputation damage or rather the threat of damage to a landlord's reputation of, hey, if you're behaving like this, everyone's going to know you're behaving like this.
Yeah, the name and shame. Well, also, I think I saw on social media that when there was the picket in front of the landlord's coffee shop, then it really hit the sales. Like people weren't going in to buy coffee. So it also, in certain cases, can hit their bottom line.
Yeah, exactly.
So, SLAM has had these successes. Meanwhile, the mayor is going, I feel like powerless facing the homelessness crisis. I can't, I don't have the power to control the private market, blah, blah, blah. And in theory, there's these regulations against, rent evictions and illegal Airbnbs and abusive rent increases or billing tenants for damages the landlord is supposed to pay for. But like in practice, it seems like those regulations don't do much. So do you think that there's anything kind of at the policy level that could improve this in tandem with direct action? Or are you kind of like feeling disenchanted the idea that policy could help?
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna take that question step by step. So
yeah, I
in
sort
terms
of
Soraya,
lumped a few things together there. Do you want me to take it back, actually?
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay.
In terms of Soraya Martinez-Frada, I mean, we know exactly why she can't do anything, which, I mean, Chris did some very good reporting for you guys about her campaign finance, and a big donor was the real estate lobby. Then CBC, or maybe it was Radio-Canada, did some reporting on the fact that she's a landlord herself, that she had charged an illegal security deposit and illegal fees. The reason that she's not willing to do anything about the housing crisis is not because she can't, it's because she doesn't want to and her donors don't want her to. She is profiting off of the so-called housing crisis. She is profiting off of the fact that housing is unaffordable, and so are the people who are funding her party. So she has every incentive to pretend that she can't do this and just try her best to hope it doesn't hurt her re-election chances, because she is materially profiting off of what's going on, and so are her donors. In terms of policymaking, I think generally the framing of the housing crisis, our view at SLAM, and my personal view as well, is that it's not really a housing crisis. It's the system of for-profit rent working exactly as intended, where landlords exist to try to extract as much capital as possible from tenants and to leverage the fact that paying rent is not the same as, I don't know, buying a television or a luxury good. You can't just say, oh, no, I don't need that. You can't just say, oh, I don't need housing.
Yeah, it's an inelastic good. Like
it's a fundamental human right.
Or an elastic good, I guess, yeah.
It's a fundamental human right, and landlords will exploit that because, and they will try to extract as much money as possible. And then you see the fact that so many people are outside on the streets, the fact that so many people can't afford housing, the fact that so many people are living paycheck to paycheck or even going into debt just to pay their rent. It is the system working as the state and as the ruling class intends. And because of that, I think that legislation can help a little bit, but another union member put it really well to me, is that legislation is crumbs, and we're not asking for crumbs. We're asking for a system where housing is not treated as a commodity. It is treated as what it should be, a basic human need that everyone gets.
Yeah, so that vision would kind of lend itself to co-ops or truly social housing.
Exactly. To co-ops and to, beyond that, expropriating housing. We see all sorts of abandoned buildings around the city. We see here, and especially in other cities like Toronto, all of these new developments where it's luxury condos that just sit empty.
Yeah.
I remember in Toronto when I was a teenager, I came across this giant, like $20 million mansion in the Bridle Path, which is a very bougie area of Toronto, that was just sitting there empty. And that plot of land was big enough it could have housed hundreds of people, although it was in a bougie area. So the neighbors, it was like across the street from Drake's house. The neighbors never worried about that. But yeah, there's all sorts of cases like that here. There's all sorts of buildings along St. Catherine, in the Old Port, in Plateau, in all of these different neighborhoods that are just sitting empty, that could be turned into public housing, that could be turned into housing. But our end goal is ultimately that housing is not something that people pay for. Our end goal is not like lower rents. Our end goal is the abolition of rent. Our end goal is that people should not be paying for something that they cannot just choose to live without. And yeah, I mean, yeah, that's the very core of what we're fighting for. I think a lot of other tenants unions have this idea that they just have to root out the bad apple landlord. It's kind of like the same people who think that the police can be reformed. In both cases, it's a broken system. You can't reform a broken system. It's not a bad apple. It's the entire bunch.
It's functioning as it was designed
exactly
to function.
I'd say the other thing is, if we look at things like, I believe it's Bill 31, the lease transfer bill, if we look at the CAC housing policy of the past 8 or so years, if we reverse all of that, if we repeal all of those bills, the damage has already been done. The cat's out of the bag. All of those, the lease transfer bill has meant that all of those low rents and all of those affordable leases are gone, and they are not coming back. And there's not really any amount of realistic legislation that is going to fix the current system beyond abolishing the current system. And that is our perspective. I think it's maybe an idea that a lot of people in the general public may not have heard before, but at the end of the day, that's our view, is that housing should be owned by the people who live in it, that housing is a human right, and that housing is not a commodity and it's not a profit vehicle.
So you've talked about, you know, the sorry state of the legislation, but also on the flip side, the fact that as tenants, there is power there in organizing. How can everyday people, you know, work together to combat the housing crisis?
I think a big thing is just knowing what you can do under the law. So you have the right to be an asshole to your landlord. You have the right to record your conversations with your landlord. As long as you're one of the parties in the conversation, you can record those conversations without consent from your landlord, because Canada has one-party consent laws.
Oh, I'm familiar as a journalist.
Yeah, exactly. And you can refuse your rent increase. You can take your landlord to the towel if they're refusing to fix major issues in your apartment or in your house. You can picket your landlord's office or your landlord's place of business. You can start a tenants council with your neighbors. You can join the tenants union, or if you live in a city where there's no tenants union, you can start a tenants union. And I think these are all things that people need to be doing. I think that sitting around and hoping for politicians that have a vested interest in this system. I mean, the stat I believe, the last time I checked, is that 41% of federal MPs are landlords. And you can sit around waiting for those people to create better conditions for tenants, but it's not going to happen. Our mayor is a landlord. Our MPs, a huge portion of our MPs are landlords. Many of our MNAs are landlords. And this is a system that for decades has produced worse housing conditions, and people need to take matters into our own hands and realize that we are a lot stronger when we band together and when we unionize together than when we just sit around and feel helpless and don't take action.
I do have one more question that I just thought of. What would you say to people who advocate for like sitting down and negotiating with your landlord and having a good relationship with your landlord? What do you think about that?
I think at the end of the day, it's like you're trying to compromise with someone whose entire role is getting as much money out of you as possible and exploiting your need for housing and your basic human needs for being housed, for having a roof over your head, in order to extract money from you, in order to extract the money that you have, the money that you are working for. And you can't really compromise with that. You can't really, it's just something that's so unethical that shouldn't exist. And I think that playing nice with your landlord means giving in, means allowing someone to exploit you.
It's not a level playing field. One person is negotiating for their housing, the other one is negotiating for money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Money that they generally do not need if they can afford to own buildings.
Do you have anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
I think, again, I would just really encourage people who are listening, who are having issues with their landlord, who maybe get a rent increase and it's even 1 or 2% above or even at what the TAL is suggesting, refuse your rent increase. Organize with your neighbors. If you have that leaky pipe that your landlord is refusing to fix, or that broken door or mold, talk to your local logement committee, talk to your local housing justice organization, and talk to your neighbors, and either find a tenants union or start one if there isn't one, and start organizing against your landlord, because we don't get better conditions by sitting around and hoping for them. We get better conditions by fighting for them.
For people who are interested, where can they find more information about the Montreal Autonomous Tenants Union?
So it's SLAM-MATU.org. That's SLAM-MATU.org, or slam.matu on Instagram. I believe there's also a Facebook and I think a Mastodon. And you can go on there. You can send us an email. You can just come and learn more and show up to our open hours, show up to a meeting, and come talk housing with people, come learn how you can organize against your landlord. We also do workshops and all sorts of events. It's the summer, so there's probably going to be some barbecues coming up. A lot of our neighborhood branches are going to have, I know that Verdun branch is having one later this month, and I think Mile End is going to be in August or September. But yeah, it's a really good place to come meet other people in your neighborhood and start organizing together for better housing conditions.
That's great. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.